My name is Nick Hinenkov, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the first, hopefully, in our Patchwork reading of series of readings of literary translation. This reading, after a brief couple-of-year hiatus, continues the older tradition of readings in literary translation, but also celebrates the 60th anniversary of the translation workshop and the upcoming in January 50th anniversary of the MFA in literary translation. This reading was organized by myself as a member of Exchanges, one of the two editors of Exchanges, along with Jack Rockwell, and the Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature. Special shout out to AJ Javaheri, who did our poster and did most of our organization. And also special shout out to John Kenyon and the Iowa City Public Library. I'm not going to bore you with any more needless information. All of our readers today are students in the MFA program. Some of them are first years, some of them are second years, but they will all be reading works that they have translated from various languages. So without further ado, our first reader is Elise Bickford. Elise is a poet, translator, an essayist. She translates from German. She is one of our second years. It is a great pleasure to have known Elise and to have got the chance to read her work over the past couple of years. Her work has appeared in Guest House, Peripheries, the Columbia Review, and Chess Life magazine. Please join me in welcoming Elise.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. I'm very excited to be here and to be reading. Can people hear me if I don't bend over the microphone? Okay, cool, perfect. Yeah, so today I'll be reading some poems from a German poet named Elke Erb. I have her book here. It's called Kastanienallee. She was a very important figure in the East German poetry scene. This book came out in 1981, but she's continued to write since reunification. And the poems are interesting in that they're often quite short and very abstract, but they come with these very long prose commentary passages. So the first poem I'll read has some commentary to go with it, and I'll just kind of pause in between the poem and the comments. Nature. It's nearly time I sing the sweet sobbing note of a bird into I don't know which wood-carved ear. Happiness, triumphant over unhappiness, the voice as pure, unmediated life in the foreign. Happiness, pure immediacy of the foreign. The foreign, pure immediate nature. Happiness as the arrival of a human in nature. The human voice, the human ear. It sings as bird, is an ear in the woods. It sings as bird, is an ear made of wood. But the sweet sobbing note is jubilant, and whoever doesn't hear it is deaf, and whoever themselves doesn't hear, their ear is purely and immediately woodcut. In the woods, there is no human ear. In the foreign, naturally no ear. But you live, no? Okay. So the next poem, I've translated the title as majority, but it's kind of a tricky German word to translate. It's mündig, which literally means to be of age, or it's the adjective for of age, but it comes etymologically from the word Mund for mouth, and so it's kind of related to this idea of being at an age when you have a political voice and when you can speak. And because the poem is about voice and speaking, I thought I would read it in German and then read my English translation. I'll try my best, not a native speaker, but mündig. Die Tränen der Plattform, ehe sie verlaufen, reden mit mir, wie die Meinung mich reute. Ruhe, Ruhe, zur Ruhe, spricht die Buche mir zu. Ja, lallt die Pappel. Was verfickt denn die Fichte? Fingerhut, Fuchse, nichts, sagen Birken. Zum Ahorn, was ist eine Ahorns Antwort? Und was lispelte die Linde? Tränen und Berg und Tal, ehe sie verlaufen, die Tränen der Plattform reden mit mir wie die Leute. So, majority. The platform's tears, before they scatter, speak to me like an opinion I regretted. Rest, rest, to rest, so the redbud says. Does the poplar babble yes? Say, what does the fig tree fight for? Foxgloves, fingerlings? Nothing, the birches say. To the alder, and what is an alder's answer? What were the lindens lisping? Tears and mountain and valley, before they scatter, the platform's tears speak to me like people. Okay, and I'll wrap up with one more poem. Reflection on the through train, memory, shock. Desire for security is, I see searching, desire for a single security in the space which a soon struck agreement makes, which one gladly, hastily takes and strikes. It's crazy, but it stands to reason. The desire wants security in the future, if not also from now on, if not also right now. A new motive, the commotion wants to find accommodations in the accord, because it's not yet accommodated. Hence the lasting confusion of, their bags must be at home, close the door, home and future. This fright when it happens, the expected face in a rare but familiar moment, in a measure where a beat outside the regulated rhythm accidentally falls in time, in the short circuit of a tautological pause, when the transcendence of home draws back like a shroud of night and fog, this blow that the expected face is only expectation, impossible to take, it hangs back, subsides, how exposed your gaze into the shutter. And the folly then, like a rat bite, the bite, wet pearls above and below the grin of an insubordinate jaw, a moronic informant lost in the sand, exposed, discomposed. Your gaze, wherein the you decomposes, a scorn light in place of light, mocks the famed misery fleetingly. Thank you.
Thank you again, Elise. Our next reader is Ani Gilavian. Ani is a translator from Armenia. She graduated from the American University of Armenia's Graduate Certificate in Translation program, in the scope of which she, alongside her group, translated authors such as Cornel West and Susan Sontag into Armenian. Interestingly, now she wants to specialize in translating comedy instead. Please join me in welcoming Ani.
Hello. So, as Nikki already mentioned, I really want to continue translating my translation in comedy. And today I'm going to present you an excerpt from a comedy play by an Western Armenian satirist and playwright, Hacop Baronyan. And I want to tell you 4 details about the play before starting to read it. First, it was written in 1868. Second, it was written in Ottoman Empire. Third, it was written about the Armenian communities, like the elite that was living in the Ottoman Empire at that time. And fourth, it is the first Armenian play that gave voice to women characters. The reason I'm telling you this is that I'm going to read the very beginning of the play, actually, which is a monologue by one of the main characters, Marta, a 16-year-old woman. And I think when you have these 4 details in your mind, the text becomes more interesting. So I'll just start. Marta enters angrily. This is unbearable. I'm growing impatient. To wait every night and again sleep alone, night after night. Only one night in a night he sleeps at home. Other nights, I don't know where. I'll ask him to find out. Did he marry me to imprison me in this house? I don't want to be a prisoner with my own money. No. I know why he leaves me alone. Because I have grown old. If I were a 16-year-old unwed girl, he wouldn't treat me like this. But if the law as such commands that women will be loved while they're young and get reproached when they're older, I have nothing to say. But I'd like to know, which rule is that? Does the Constitution command this? In what article is this? When I was a young woman, 16 years old, I was such an exemplary young lady that every day as I walked through town, everyone was waiting to see me on their path. During that time, couldn't I, if I wanted to, have had a romance with someone? Not even once did I raise my eyes to look at any of them, because my mother ordered it that way, because modesty called for it. I'll never forget, when I was exiting the church, all the men who served the church were gathering in front of the door, pretending to talk to one another. When I was passing by them, how many times I, with my own ears, have heard them saying, "Look, my friend, how lovely that woman is. I would give 1,000 gold coins to have a wife like her. Look how attractive her eyes are, how rosy her cheeks are." These words were accurate, since indeed I had rosy cheeks back then. Afterwards, another would say, "Brother, look at her black hair, her white hands, small feet." All of these were true, but I would continue my way without looking at them. And now he leaves me alone like this? Indeed, I'm 15 years older than him. But I didn't grab his collar and say, "Come, marry me." He, by his own will, begged to marry me. Since I was so exemplary, since I was rich, since I was well educated, since I had money, what do I know? I had a lot of good things, and now every night he takes off saying, "I need to pull some teeth." She sings, and I'm going to do that too. No, no, I don't want that night after night. My spouse leaves my side to pull out one tooth. That's it, when he comes, I'll tell everything, so he'll know I am human, not a thing. No, no, I don't want this, no, not at all, no, 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 no. Let's put all this aside. Didn't he know we'll grow old before him? Is this all my fault, or is it nature's? To what he calls natura or fatura, let him bury himself with his natura. A husband that becomes rich with his wife's money and at the end acts this way. What apathy, what barbarity. Thank God I'm not blind. I mean, not fully. Not a hunchback. Do not have any body deformities. She looks in the mirror. What do I have? Why doesn't he like me? Only my hair is a bit grayer. Is that an issue? Just as each season has its beauty and value, doesn't each age also have the same beauty? Isn't the mountain in spring green still beautiful in winter snow? But men always want the spring. From this day on, it needs to be known that each age has its beauty and value. I don't say this to get a run of applause from the ladies. I'm not a flatterer. I just state the truth. Oh, husbands, everywhere you depreciate women, gossip about them. Now the time has come. They will also start writing books describing your behavior. Oh, Taparnikos, I'll take a revenge on you. Revenge. She takes the bottle from the table and breaks it by throwing it on the floor. Thank you.
Later today, we'll be announcing the Literary Translation Karaoke series. That was amazing. Our next reader is Mars Graver Sage. They are a poet, a baker, and a translator from French and Old English. They're currently working on some queer Quebecois literature, but today they'll be reading something else, which I'll let them introduce themselves. Please join me in welcoming Mars.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to be reading some translations of poems by Anna Grecki. She wrote these between 1957 and 59. She was a French-Algerian revolutionary, and she actually wrote these poems while she was in prison for her revolutionary involvement. Yeah, and she's extremely well known in Algeria, but not so much in the rest of the French-speaking world. Definitely not the English-speaking world. Okay. Taking Root for Ahmed Inal. All in order. Look, my loves are folded in my heart, and my heart is set like the horizon. I shook the hands of friends, the heat of transhuman homes. This is how I blaze with pride. All in order. Your veins' blue gold is in my gaze. At the peaks of nursing mountains, in the air, hard and patient like a lizard, I am on the straight path of nebulous things, through forests as they're wasting. You walk in my eyes so I can rest, and your silence breaks the bare exhaustion. You make the buried soil sing in my mind, while I cut out from my chest the space of a millennium. Leaving, I lodge your presence, anchor of your kindness, down below the hates. Right of asylum rules in your heart, and I use you as I want to, like I'm opening my vein. All in order. It's no longer me the sun makes drunk on snows of another coast. My belongings fit me exactly like my skin, and while I stay awake, night open wide on Ramadan's sheer slope, in the town weighed down by steel, my mother straightens my books she cannot read and ages. It's all in order. This one's called November Sun. The sun this morning sounds like the town crier. What's it saying? What does it want in the weight of shadows shattered? It cries out it has love to sell and rich blood, its hands. It cries out over the roofs of Alger the white, Alger the red, the day's damp joy and the jaunty bitterness of life. Okay, this is the last one. It's called Vitality. You've got none of me. You touch a body out of tune, tarnished, useless, the languor, the exile. I'll sleep it within your fragile flesh. Years of languor as the earth lights up where the Mediterranean moves, tender and blushing toward the belly of sorrows, where the marauding ravens drown the horizon of their distress, while in me our earth is sown. O Mayan fertilizer, stripping me of myself. You'll find me once again, once I've touched it, once I've left you. Like a kernel opened on an untwinned body, I do not want us to be this abandoned husk. Your silence has a voice of reason. Your erasure dazzles the blind. Strange stranger of mine, tender maze, hurt by our rigid certainties. You are heavy. You are here. More than I could attest or want to confess. Must I hurt or lie? The air between us is humiliated flesh, my thorn at its heart. Let me unleash us. Let me heal us. Let me lead you. I do not want you to be the stubborn wake left behind each daybreak, slipping after us. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Mars. Our next reader is Itamar Shalev. Itamar is a translator and writer in English and Hebrew. His works have been published in the Trinity Journal of Literary Translation. Please welcome Itamar.
Hello. So I decided to read the first chapter of a novel called "Hachaim Kemashal," which means "Life as a Parable," by Pinchas Sadeh. It's kind of it's a very unusual book. At least it was unusual at the time because it was written like about 50 years ago, and back then it was very unorthodox for someone who's age 27 to write a memoir. You were supposed to be accomplished in some way to speak about yourself, but no, that guy really thought he was special. So something interesting about Pinchas Sadeh as a thinker is that he was Jewish, but he was very much fascinated with Christianity, and he kind of sounds like he wants to be kind of like the Messiah or something. So I'll read a little bit of the Hebrew, and then I'll read the first chapter, hopefully the whole thing, of the novel, Life as a Parable, Hachaim Kemashal by Pinchas Sadeh. So, למברג. אף כי אני בא לספר על חיי, מראשיתם ועד עצם היום הזה, במלאת לי 27 שנים, הרי עיקר סיפורי יסוב על 10 או 15 השנים האחרונות. אני חושב כך, לידתו האמיתית של האדם אינה חלה ברגע שגופו נולד, אלא בשעה אשר באה מתוך חבלים וסבל, מתרחש לו מאורע פנימי, רוחני, שעל ידיו בא האדם לראשונה לידי הכרת הווייתו. הנשמה הראשונה הייתה הנשמה הטבעית, והחיים שהיא חוללה היו רק בבחינת אפשרות. הנשמה השנייה היא הנשמה הרוחנית, שעל ידיה הופכים החיים להתגשמות. Now the English. Although I aim to narrate my life from its genesis to this very day, having reached the age of 27, the larger part of my story revolves around the last 10 or 15 years. I think thus: the true birth of man does not happen the minute his body is born, but at the time when, out of bondage and pain, an internal spiritual occurrence brings him to a consciousness of his being. The first soul is the natural soul, and the life that it produces amounts but to a possibility. The second soul is the spiritual soul, by which life becomes a realization. My first birth happened at Lemberg. I have two parents, more than is necessary for my happiness, but enough to repent for all my sins. My father by origin is a villager. His ancestors were innkeepers. By nature, but on his nature I do not wish to say a word. In any case, he deserves mercy, the same share of mercy we all deserve, for we are poor, sculpted of dust and doomed to oblivion. We are all in oblivion. My mother is an urbanite, and her ancestors had a tiny shop that sold pastries. My mother's maiden name was Krochmal, and one of her family's descendants a few generations ago was the philosopher Nachman Krochmal, author of The Guide for the Perplexed of Our Time. Numerous times I asked my mother about that man, whose lonely life and the transcendent nature of his work enchanted me. My mother knew almost nothing about him, and it seems the family was completely indifferent to the genius who emerged from it. I was named Pinchas. This name, like Moses, comes from ancient Egypt and means the dark-skinned one. More than once, I pondered about the meaning hidden in that name, but found none. Neither have I found in myself any resemblance, except maybe a sort of fanaticism, to the original owner of my name. Somehow I'm not particularly fond of it. My birth, so my mother told me, happened at the moment that the striking clock announced noon. She said the doctor was forced to bring me into this world using forceps because my behavior clearly showed that I was not all too thrilled to be born. Who knows? Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I always tended to sleep a lot. In my poem, 5 Parables of Sleep, after I liken sleep to a green bird, a girl, and a mountain stream, I compare it to a giant ape calling me to turn with it to the dark woods, and to 3 women carrying me like a baby in their fine arms. Is my time up? Yeah, okay. Toda raba. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next reader, who I don't really need a little piece of paper to introduce, is Jack Rockwell. Jack Rockwell is a literary translator, writer, and editor, namely one of the 2 editors-in-chief of Exchanges, the Journal of Literary Translation here at the MFA. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in the Chicago Review, Words Without Borders, and Latin American Literature Today, and more, many, many more. He's also a very, very dear friend. Please join me in welcoming Jack.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm going to read a short passage from a short story by an Ecuadorian writer named Daniela Alcivar-Bedolio. This story was first published in 2017, and it's titled On This Diaphanous Morning. The empty gazes of my grandmother's figurines were my distraction throughout the afternoon siestas. If I'd been lucky that morning, I'd have a red lollipop and some of my favorite candies to pass the dead hours. I ate them slowly, and I lost myself in the outlines of the figurines, clearly defined against the afternoon glow that came in from the small back patio, tinted by the curtains, always closed at this time. There was no sound other than that of the fans and my careful footsteps in the living room. All the doors would be closed, and so there I remained, isolated by the sleep of the adults. I held conversations in my head with the slim women on the shelves, trying to listen for any murmurs their solid bodies might emit. I watched them with something like envy and supreme curiosity, the remoteness suggested by their dresses, the hand-painted lace, and their tall hairstyles, complete with porcelain feathers, all agitated my thoughts and distracted me from the dangerous and unlikely animal that lived in me during siestas. These figures were always there, clean and in their usual places, for years after when I would normally come to visit. Just like the smell of Lula, just like the life left behind in Guayaquil, everything went on as if no accidents nor surprises existed in this world. On those afternoons back then, and also now, I think, with the figurines sold or gifted, the house demolished, that smell of the room they would give me when I visited finally dissipated, the morning hum of the radio silenced forever, these afternoons seemed like an immense extension that went out with a steady stride and routine and invariable interruptions. Life seemed to walk with its indifferent step amongst my grandparents, my aunts, and through my own interior. It went unannounced with its smoked yellow color from the afternoon siestas, putting one thing after another and running like a river, peaceful but of imperturbable current, far away from any contingency and with an end as elusive as it was real. The minute agitations of this morning, serving breakfast, doing the dishes, my grandfather's engineering busy work, the indefatigable domestic activity, and then putting feet up and waiting for the lunchtime groceries to arrive, and the evenings, my grandmother's glass of rum and ice, the buttered toasts, my aunt's laughter, and some game show on the television. All these accentuated, at the end of the day, the impression that we were natural siblings of the porcelain figurines, that our true constitution was solid and unchanging, and that life would appear in us for hardly a moment here or there to unsettle the shadowy corners of the house, and then to return them to their original silence. Years later, while visiting the house, after waking up one morning, I left the room, crossed the dark and ordered kitchen, opened the swinging door, and the scene was repeated perfectly. To my right, the bottomless shelves of the figurines that I very intentionally ignored at this time of morning. And to my left, the white tablecloth folded to cover just a third of the large dinner table. My cup and my plate, empty, carefully arranged by my grandfather on the headboard, waiting solicitously for me to come and fill them with material. My grandmother, already immersed in the radio's murmur and her crossword, and my grandfather returning from the patio, his white hair uncombed and his hands filthy from some work interrupted when he heard that I'd gotten up. The curtains opened at this time of morning, the white light that came in from the patio, the clouded sky, and the heat, the wide smiles and the embraces which, though I tried to resist it, just barely unsettled that thing that would come out during the siesta hour, once again, like when I was a little girl, to besiege me. There was a minimal shine to the large flowers on the living room wallpaper. Looking at them, I felt like I was on some lost and improbable set piece, like a castle or a French mansion from bygone centuries, something much more appropriate for my grandmother's figurines than for myself. The wallpaper deployed every possible variant on the dull white color of bones. Between the petals, the leaves, and the background with its motley weave, the changes in tone were infinitesimal, but they were there. Just one of the leaves, as though by error, some carelessness of the manufacturer, was sky blue, a faded, tired blue, as though spent. During the afternoon siestas, I watched this interminable series of large flowers with its lone blue leaf, resting around that kind of ceiling with the abstract arabesques, and I lost myself in the repetition as in a monotonous sea, and little by little, I began to feel like my body was getting lost in those lines that prefigured the end of the individual. Thank you very much.
Thank you again so much, Jack. Our last reader for this first half of our reading is Ara or AJ Javaheri, after which we'll take a little 5 to 10 minute break. We have some refreshments over here for you, and then we'll come back for our second slew of readers. But now for AJ. AJ is, we can clap. AJ is a translator between English and Farsi. She has translated 17 novels from English into Farsi, and I'm sure she will translate almost as many from Farsi into English. But I think for today, she'll be reading us some poetry. Please welcome AJ.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming and sharing your Saturday afternoon with us. We really appreciate you being here. My piece today is very short, but before getting to that, I would like to use this opportunity to stand in solidarity with all of my friends here who are being affected by yet another war. I want to believe that in this community we are all standing on the side of peace, on the side of humanity and innocent humans. I want you to know that we are here for you if you need us, and that we are really proud of being your friend. So today, I will read my translation of a poem called Restless Days by Iranian poet Hossein Qiyasi. This poem was turned into a song by our renowned singer Alireza Qurbani, and it was dedicated to the people of Iran for everything they have been through, especially during the past year. It was dedicated to all the young lives we have lost and are still being taken in our endless fight for freedom. And I want to dedicate it to all the innocent humans who are watching their homelands turn into ashes from afar. Oh, bereavement, what do you want from my troubled heart? Oh, old scar, what do you want from my soul? I have a dried lake in my arms. Oh, bloodshot rain, what do you want from the clouds in my eyes? How to mourn all this loss? Oh, death, what do you want from my friends? Where's my peace? Where's my laughter? Where is my trust? I'm left with nothing and don't know what you ask of me anymore. We are the inheritors of countless pains. We are the tears of awaiting eyes. We are a faraway land, alone in the dust. We have nothing but grief. We have nothing but us. We are the yearning for an unbroken laughter. We are tired of these restless days. Oh, world, say grief won't last any longer. Say our dreamless world won't remain grieving. Say something. Settle this chaos. Say this choking burden won't remain in the chests. O playful fortune, tell the occupants of high thrones we will not remain down here forever. The cry of this grief house will not be silenced. Farhad in this legend will not remain without his shooting. We are the inheritors of countless pains. We are the tears of awaiting eyes. We are a faraway land, alone in the dust. We have nothing but grief. We have nothing but us. Thank you.
Thank you, AJ. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll regroup. Thank you all very much.
So first of all, I wanted to say, again, thank you all so much for coming. It's so delightful to see you all here. And thanks for sticking around as well. We got another slate of 6 readers. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jack. I'm also a student in the Translation MFA. I'm going to be introducing the second half of our reading list with far less wit and charm than our first introducer, unfortunately, but we'll have to take what we can get. Our next reader is Allie Fredette. Allie is a first-year translator from Cincinnati, Ohio. She's an MFA candidate at the University of Iowa's Translation Workshop. She translates from Spanish, French, and Italian, and is working on her debut translation of Spanish poetry. Please join me in welcoming Allie.
Okay, bad day to wear a sweater. I'm very warm right now. Okay, so I'm going to be reading from a collection of poetry by Cristina Peri Rossi. She still writes. She's alive today. She lives in exile in Spain, but she writes short stories and poetry. This is a collection called Europa después de la lluvia. And the first poem that I'm going to read, I'll just be reading poems today. And the first one is a poem that made me like poetry, which is saying a lot, I feel like, so for me at least. So, okay. Great cycles. 1. Like primitive man learned that snow came, settled in, and after some time that they counted by calculating sunrises and sunsets, snow went away. I had to learn the cycles of your appearances and exits. You pose yourself on the furniture in my house with books and overgarments, like a light dusting of snow I see, surprisingly adhere to all things. I shift then in silence, so as not to disturb the order the snow brings. 2. In the haze there are trees no one sees. Snow is made of silence and eternity. You cover me with your presence, and I collect myself. 3. Snow, the great organizer, immense and deserted parks that spread, palaces of crystal and surreal trees. Statues silhouette themselves in ice, survivors of a great catastrophe. 4. But one day you leave, the slow palaces thaw, windows become transparent. I stumble through the rooms, as someone who doesn't know how to walk amongst the melted snow. 5. No one knows if the first man felt pleasure or nostalgia when the rivers thawed, if he suffered believing his eyes would never again see the immense frozen plains. Perhaps he wept, his tears sent downstream, but after some time, snow floated again. She came from afar, he, rendered speechless, and in his submission there was understanding. From then on, he knew that the snow came and went. It wasn't necessary to wait for her. In the same way, cycling, you leave and return. Rhythmic and silent, covering the path with trimmings of snow, where I find meaning, inscriptions. So that was the first one. This one I totally did not translate this morning. This one is called Contemplation, and it's up for much debate with my dear friend Brian Salinas, who was helping me work on it this morning. So the version we have going right now, which will probably change, is the rain awakens, the earth cries, objects that the water lets fall contemplate me mute, surprised to find me awake. That one's pretty short. Okay, I'm going to read one that's called Europe After the Rain, or Europa después de la lluvia, and it's about a painting by Max Ernst. I don't know if you're familiar, but she's describing it. Boiling magma had rained, liquefying all forms. The hanging birdman, solidified, refused to look at us. Ultimate reproach. Solitary monoliths rise above the sky, luminous, like improbable gods after the storm. Europe is an indefinable mass of waste. The lava has corroded the autonomy of the rocks, perforated the metals, mineralized the trees and plants, liquefied the mountains, obstructed the rivers. In the midst of the decomposition blows the immutability of death. Hanging fossils, displaced limbs, broken totems, bodies devoured by the magma. The apocalyptic light illuminates warped remains. But quietly, below the fossilized forms and the confusion of movement, there is suspicion of larval life that begins to beat with a spasm of horror. Infernal circle of eternal return. And then my last one, which seems to me like an ode to Freud, is called Anthropology. Nights like these, in which the youngest part of my brain, that comes only from the Mesozoic, butts against the primal, dating back to the age of the Neanderthal. So in my words of love, there's a hidden destruction. I caress you with uncertainty. I forget who I am. I don't know who you are. My home is foreign. What's on the table? I avoid mirrors. I don't want to look at you. I'm a contradictory animal, and not even in that original. That's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Our next reader is Ili Sheedin. Ili is a German Afghani translator in her second year of the MFA. She has a bachelor degree in German and English literature and linguistics and wrote her thesis about translanguaging. Prior to the program at Iowa, she translated librettos for the Opera Dortmund in Germany. She mostly translates political nonfiction texts. Please join me in welcoming Ili.
Okay, I would like to introduce the author real quick and this person here too. First of all, Şeyda Kurt, the author, is a German-Kurdish journalist, podcast producer, and writer for various magazines in Germany. Her book Radikale Zärtlichkeit, which I call Radical Tenderness, came out in 2021. It's a nonfiction book that deconstructs the term romantic love with an intersectional approach, meaning from a feminist, anti-capitalist, and anti-patriarchal perspective. I'm going to read an excerpt that follows the first chapter of the book, and in the first chapter she tells us how she experienced family constructs and romantic love when she grew up. She draws comparisons to pop media and capitalist views of love. She concludes the chapter with a fictional interview with Karl Marx. And I want to thank Brian Salinas, who's not only a Spanish-English translator and a wonderful poet, but also an interviewee now. Because he's going to voice Şeyda Kurt.
I am very excited to welcome philosopher Karl Marx, who actually died 130 years ago, for an interview. Good afternoon, Mr. Marx.
Hi.
We just read the first chapter. Did you like it?
I prefer Shakespeare. Your writing is rather confusing.
I wanted to talk to you because of one crucial idea that you might have thoughts on. It's about the idea that love equates labor. That is, that love is labor. In your bestsellers, you say that human labor is alienated in our capitalist society. People can neither self-actualize nor put their abilities to use. They can't identify with the products of their labor. Instead, human labor and its products become commercialized, produced for the market instead of for one's own interpersonal needs. So, what does that mean for love?
The logic of the market permeates our human relations. A younger colleague, at least one that is still alive, once wrote something about that. What was her name again?
You mean the sociologist Eva Illouz?
Yes, that one. In her book, Consuming the Romantic Utopia, she says, although the market does not control the entire spectrum of romantic relationships, most romantic relationships depend on consumption, directly or indirectly, and consumerist activity have thoroughly permeated our romantic imagination.
By that, Eluse likely imagined things like the romantic candlelight dinner, picnics, or couples' vacations, and also goods and activities that are only indirectly related to romantic relationships, yet oftentimes get associated with romance through advertisement. Household appliances, jewelry, cars, for example.
Precisely. And I love when she says, my own analysis confirms the Marxian claim concerning the all-pervasiveness of commodification. Beautiful.
At the same time, however, Eluse notes that consumption-oriented love under capitalism could enable emancipatory potential. For example, self-actualization or equality between genders.
And yet we see capitalism and therefore the self-perception of the people living under these conditions consistently being in crisis. In-depthness here, midlife crisis there. And always questioning, am I still productive? Am I still valuable? This crisis is the essence of capitalism.
Can we even argue that love is labor? In the end, it doesn't even produce anything material, nothing palpable. Not like a hammer or a screwdriver.
Don't you have other problems?
Maybe we can stand by love being labor, if it actually appears in a common reality with other people in their environment, if it creates visible change that intervenes and shapes the course of history.
Boring.
Mr. Marx, help me out here. I have to finish writing this book. There's one thing I'm still curious about. If we assess that love is labor and the latter is always alienated under capitalism, would that mean that under the current conditions, love is meant to fail, at least for the working class?
It is meant to fail for everyone. It is, however, the working class that has nothing material to lose or no economic interest to defend. They are the ones who will create a revolutionary change which will allow for new relationships and forms of love.
So how would they look according to your communist revolution?
For that, I'm going to quote from the work Principles of Communism by my boy Friedrich Engels. It will transform the relations between the sexes into a purely private matter which concerns only the persons involved and into which society has no occasion to intervene. It can do this since it does away with private property and educates children on a communal basis. And in this way removes the two bases of traditional marriage, the dependence rooted in private property of the woman on the man and the children on the parents.
So the relationship between sexes would solely change if the economic conditions get revolutionized. But who will lead this revolution, Mr. Marx?
The workers, the revolutionary subjects of my philosophy.
That you mainly conceptualized as male.
I have frequently mentioned in my early work that the position of women in society will set the benchmark for the entire development of society.
But still, you lack an independent theory about the situation and labor of women and other genders. In fact, in factory, in the family, and the household. You also mostly neglected the fight and revolutionary opposition of enslaved people and non-white workers in technologically underdeveloped countries. Why?
Listen, we wanted to overcome capitalism and bring about revolution back then. There was no time for this kind of nitpicking from your social media bubble.
But didn't you and Friedrich Engels take the easy way out by postponing the question of gender equality until the demise of capitalism?
Easy? Everything is complicated enough, I believe.
And can you promise that those cis male subjects of the revolution will also be compelled in revolutionizing their patriarchal hierarchy in communities, relationships, and in the household?
Sometimes I help with the dishes. Hashtag not all men.
Mr. Marx.
Gotta run.
All right. Our next reader needs no introduction, but we got to start somewhere. Nikki Nankov writes and translates in Bulgarian and English. They like to focus on the weird and the queer and are currently working on a collection of Balkan folk songs. Please join me in welcoming my dear friend, Nikki.
Hi again. I will not be reading a song today. Instead, I'll be reading from a story called The Unfamiliar Figures of Men by Bulgarian writer Sonia Tudorova. It's a weird little story about a guy who gets in a skiing accident, and for the rest of his life, every time he looks in the mirror, he sees an animal where his head should be. And that's really all you need to know. 20 years later, I still can't say I've gotten used to living with this problem of mine. I accept it, of course, I have no choice, but I'm forced to renegotiate the terms I and to live with myself every day. None of the 39 ophthalmologists I've seen during this time, both in the country and abroad, have been able to prescribe a treatment. My eyes have no structural defects. There's no pathology at all. My issue can be measured or observed, which makes its study functionally impossible. At the same time, everyone around me claims that whenever they look at me or my reflection in any mirror service, they see the same thing, me. There's no reason for me not to believe them, even though it is incredibly difficult. If what they say is in fact true, that I'm the only reason who cannot see my own face. I haven't seen myself in exactly 20 years, 7 months, and 2 days. My body is aging normally, my skin is gradually loosening, my muscles have given way to my belly, my palms are marked with fine wrinkles that no longer disappear when I stretch them out. Everything is as it should be, except from the clavicles up, where the tendons of the neck connect to the body, my skin gradually turns to scales, or feathers, or fur in various shapes and colors, depending on my mood, the season, the hour of day, or with no connection to anything at all, and then goes on to the head of a turtle, or a dog. Sometimes it's a crocodile, or a cow, a cack, a stork, a lemur, a weasel, zebra, shoebill, a praying mantis, a badger, a catfish. I've also been an armadillo, a seal, a cuttlefish, a camel, a gorilla, a Tasmanian devil, and a housefly. On my first date with my then-future wife, I was a fallow deer, and I was terribly anxious that one of my appendages would knock over her glass of wine as I leaned down to decipher the menu in the romantic candlelight. Of course, as I was heading out, my mom had told me that she couldn't see a fallow deer, but rather a nice-looking young man whose nerves were playing a joke on him. I did everything I could to believe her, but still spent all of dinner in fear that one of the thick red hairs of my fallow deer face would fall onto the table, or, worse, into her soup. I don't even want to think about our first kiss. When we got married, under the white silk bow tie was the ugly, scaled head of a South American rattlesnake. A year later, in the hospital, in the glass wall that separated the row of newborns from their dads, I could see a small brownish squirrel with a nervous and confused look on his face. At the divorce, I was an echidna. My elongated nose and my round jokester eyes, paired with the fur ending in spines, were perfect for the occasion. I should add that my issue presents only in the way I perceive my image when reflected on the surface. My speech and thought processes remain the same, as do my eating habits. Well, there have been some changes, but they're an indirect consequence of my condition. I stray away from people, it's unavoidable, although I do try not to. I have been working with autosuggestion recently to convince myself that my face and head are fully normal, human, my own face and head. This has been made difficult by the fact that I haven't seen myself in a while and I don't remember my own features. To preempt the question, no, I do not take photos of myself. I know that photography and self-observation through photographs would most likely make my life easier, but that would only be true if I did, in fact, look like a human. Of course, what else would I look like? Everyone would be screaming about my hippo head, as it was yesterday. And yet, as I don't want to offend my close ones with the assertion that I don't fully believe them, I explain my reticence to be in photographs differently. I tell them that there's no way for me to be sure that my eyes won't react to a photograph with the same pathology as to a reflection. After all, a photo is a type of reflection. For this reason, I requested to have special personal identification documents without a photo. My mother said then that it wasn't that hard to convince a doctor to file the request, given my special ophthalmological status, even though I'm not actually blind and can see the psychiatrist who came with us perfectly well. No matter. Better to be crazy than to have a gross, yellow-spotted black salamander on my ID. Needless to say, I have a degree in zoology. I had declared my major even before this issue reappeared, because I was always interested in the topic. I specialize in biodiversity, preservation, and conservation, and after I finished my doctorate, I was a kangaroo at graduation, I applied to be a curator at the Museum of National History. Since then, I've spent my days between the large glass displays of taxidermy mounts, and I do really like my job. On the one hand, having a good working knowledge of animal species brings me great security. Even though I try to avoid mirrors and other reflective surfaces as much as possible, the ability to recognize and name every animal whose head I'm walking around with at any moment calms me down. Other than that, when I walk the great halls of the museum to inspect the exhibits, my reflection merges with the countless rows of horns, scales, and furs, and sometimes I don't think about the fact that that day I'm, say, a lizard. Or I do think about it, but I don't feel as alone. Even now, the kind image of the big-eyed, round-eared loris I saw in my afternoon tea somewhat merges with the rest of the primates in Hall 4. I left at last for my rounds today on purpose. I wanted a distraction because I'm sad and I'm scared. About an hour ago, my daughter called to say that she's leaving for a school trip. She's going skiing. Thank you.
All right. Our next reader is Grace Namulski. Grace is a second-year MFA candidate in the Literary Translation program who works with Japanese and Mandarin, both simplified and traditional characters. They earned their bachelor's from Middlebury College, where they were introduced to the works of the late Yu Luhua, the author they are currently translating for their thesis and whose works they hope to continue working on. Hobbies include Riichi Mahjong, letting their cat know how adorable she is, and sleeping. Please join me in welcoming Grace. Thank you.
Hi. It's excerpt from Xiao Hong's 后花园, the back garden. So I'll just hop onto it. And please feel free to close your eyes. The back garden blossomed in May and bore fruit in June. Cucumber, eggplant, maize, a large cloud-like bean, wintermelon, watermelon, tomato, and the clambering vines of cushaw squash. These vines climbed their way to the top of the wall, extending past the garden. Atop these cushaw vines was a single large yellow flower, blooming in the direction of the main road. Overlooking this bustling back garden was a dark and desolate mill. The mill's rear window faced the gardens. By chance, lining the outside of the window was a row of cucumbers. Though they weren't squash, they had the same creeping vines that bloomed upon the windowsill, cleverly bearing fruit. In the morning dew, the tender tips of the vines looked like light green glass threads, the type you didn't dare reach, for they would surely break with a single touch. The vines extended upwards, bearing fruit as they scaled the window together, almost like they'd learned this from each other. By June, the window was sealed shut, plop, plop, by a big cucumber, little cucumber, skinny cucumber, fat cucumber, and the smallest baby cucumber hanging from the window. A single flower was still perched atop their heads, having yet to fall. And so with each trembling vibration of the mill's copper sieve came the swaying of these few window-top cucumbers. The sieve rang beneath the mill workers' feet. Right foot, thunk, left foot, thunk. The cucumbers on the window plop plopped with the right foot, thunk, the left foot, thunk. The back garden was even more lively in June. Butterflies and dragonflies fluttered, and praying mantises and grasshoppers leaped. The large persimmons from foreign lands were all ripe red. Some eggplants green and some were purple, resplendent and plump. Every plant grew 3 or 4 or 5. The tassels on the maize had only just sprouted. Each was a different color, just like a woman's unclasped hair clip of embroidered silk. There were red and green ones, dark and light ones, clean to a point that there was simply no reason as to why they were so clean, or how they came to be so. Perhaps they'd been washed in water, or perhaps they were coated in oil, but none of these seemed to be the case. They were so spotless, it was as if they'd never been touched. But these beautiful threads didn't produce any sort of fragrance. The bees and butterflies would never land on these threads, nor would they drink any nectar. Even so, a few butterflies flitted haphazardly above the blooming flowers. There was a giant tree on the side of the garden that ran alongside the mill workers' residence. Because the groundskeeper was an honest and reliable old man, unconcerned with appearances, most of his flower garden turned into a vegetable garden. There were no good flowers in the remaining plants: purslane, Japanese ivy, Marvel Peru, winged beans. These were all herbs without any sort of value. Everything would be buried under the heavy snowfall in winter, and they would all die. Then spring would sweep the land clean, reviving the plants once more. Some didn't need replanting. Those sprung up on their own, like the giant ornamental onion. It came up on its own. With no one to pick up the seeds that fell this year, they would sprout the next. Then the next year they would fall, and once again, without anyone to pluck them, they would sprout on their own. After years and generations of this, the garden no longer had space for large flowers. At the foot of the wall and beside the pergola, these plants grew in bunches amongst the cushaw and cucumbers that lined both sides of the pavement. Those disagreeable cushaw vines wound completely around their bodies, entangling themselves further and pulling them down. But they continued to bloom on the ground. The groundskeeper, when he encountered them, always plucked them, but the more he plucked, the faster they grew. The first wave of flowers to bloom drooped and fell to the ground, only to be born anew not long after. So he shoveled and plucked endlessly until they became nothing more than a nuisance. And there were still those that had been tied down by the vines. If he wanted to pluck those, then he would have to pull up the squash as well. Left with no other choice, he let them remain on the ground to bloom. They grew tall, 5 or 6 feet, almost as tall as maize and just a bit taller than a person, blooming in vibrant abundance. People didn't consider them flowers, bending, snapping, and pulling them up by the roots however they pleased. Children who came to play in the garden tore out bundles, and women picked them to stick in their hair. From the caretaker to the people who came to play, not a single person cared for these flowers. These flowers had never been watered. They bore the brunt of the blowing wind, withstood the sun's rays. But the more they bloomed, the redder they became, and the more they bloomed, the more brilliant they grew, illuminating the garden and intensifying June's heat to a boiling point. The marvel of Peru, golden lotus, and Japanese ivy were all ablaze. Japanese ivy, in particular, was brilliant and dazzling red, a red that would eventually burst and trickle down like juice. From the mill, the garden looked unfathomably many times more brilliant, as if it had simply turned to metal, heated to such passion by the flames. But the mill worker inside the mill was silent. So yeah, that's only the beginning, but...
Our next reader is Emily Grimm. Emily is a writer and translator of contemporary French literature, particularly the poetry of Linda Maria Bedos. She is the recipient of the 2022 World Literature Today Student Translation Prize in Poetry for her translation of Barros's poem, Je saute dans les rues avec l'ange. Please excuse my French. Her work has been published in Asymptote, the New England Review, and is forthcoming in Fence and Modern Poetry and Translation. Please join me in welcoming Emily. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Oh, wow. So yeah, I have a few Barrows poems for us today. Okay. The first one I'm going to read is called Someone Acts on Orders. And I will forewarn you, this stuff gets pretty gnarly. So, yeah. So someone acts on orders. Someone wears a mask, acts on orders, screams in the streets, keeps quiet. And where I go, my flesh burns, behind me opens up the earth. The apartment blocks recognize me, step aside, their lights embrace. Enemies sing, are at each other's throats. And where I go, bosses dupe, snatchers dawdle, swindlers think of jail and mess tin. Middlemen hang, exfoliated from ropes. Boys howl before the pumps, hose each other with gasoline, laugh. From the high roofs, slender girls learn to fly once more through friction, setting fire to the sadness of the walls, the sidewalks that already invaded this city like magma. Where I arrive, fortune tellers have gone before me. At the crossroads, protective barriers, the canine unit. Upstairs, the silent partners dispersing the group of ushers and peddlers like a handful of sand, just enough for them to wave picket signs, loudspeakers, balaclavas, just enough for the signs to fade. The bikers, the brave organ donors, scream at the top of their lungs, slash their arms. Others sealed over the street. Scalpers stoop, caught in the machine under the membrane of fog. Those who wash corpses wait, saddened on the steps. They pick up cigarette butts next to those who wash epaulets. And all around flutter dead birds who survey you with their indifferent, glassy eyes. Where I should burn myself alive this evening, there is a sea of flags taking up spaces, streets, railway stations, as if the entire city had shit on the immense LCD screens that loop the advert of our arrival, and then the earth starts to tremble. Okay, so that's the first one. And then, yeah, okay. So, okay, I'll just do this one because I don't want to take up too much time. So this one is called No Man Has Defended You. The men who meet you always lose weight. No man has defended you, and those who have secretly tried, you halved them at the waist with sword. No man has defended you, and those who have tried to hunt the lawless herons of your breasts with their tongue have forgotten that every expired phallus believes the breasts of women emit a sporadic light. No man has defended you, and those who sped like relentless free runners from one hip to the other, you sent them back. After the inconveniences, the limits, the remedies, you sent them back to the burnt-out forge which they had already passed through. No man has defended you, has understood from where came your soft steps spreading so much sadness onto the thick napes of trackers' necks. No man has defended you, and those who have tried, while putting on the uniform under their skin, have demanded you to prepare a place for them within your naive body. And your body would have to wear them, just like a tender apple unwittingly wears its worms. No man has defended you, and those who have tried were suddenly hiding out in the swimmer's locker room. They split into enchanting curls while repeatedly trying to levitate. No man has defended you, and those who have tried, under the light of your whip, of their paralyzed words, were stepping on themselves like an elephant on its trunk and collapsing into bed. Alone, you raised your brow and looked towards the dusk, towards the veiny sky. No man has defended you, as if some of them were young boys still loitering in the urinals, and the others old sea wolves who wait for the winds, the fogs, the sirens to light St. Elmo's fire like before at the top of the masts. No man has defended you, and to those who have looked at you in their unconsciousness through the haze of the ejaculatory calling, you told them in a thunderous voice that no man has defended you, that they had all lain down in the black bed of sense, blinded and infibulated like in front of the excised girls from Africa. And no man has defended you, and those who tried begged you at night and wept at length onto the ogive of your pelvis, onto its pink texture of chrysoberyl. And you told them that at this time, in the English park behind the asylum, the gardener's daughter was digging the chest of your lover with her breasts. You told them that no man had defended you, and since then, no man has defended you, and none have ever even tried. Because you are hiding your eunuch under your skin, the pressurized vaginal cube, and the men who meet you always lose weight. Thank you.
All right. And last but certainly not least, it's my really great pleasure to introduce Adele Michaelis. Adele is a Hebrew translator and an English nonfiction writer. They have strong feelings about that one meme of a guy with a crazy conspiracy corkboard from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That man's name is Charlie Day, by the way. They live in Iowa City with a cat, a roommate, and 3 friendly ghosts. Please join me in welcoming Arel. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm going to read for you today from a manifesto that was published in the 2010s in an underground zine. The manifesto is titled "To the Homos." You'll soon understand why. And before I do so, I did want to say that as an Israeli, I am grieving, shocked, sad for my people who have been murdered, for the people on the other side who have been murdered, and that I don't condone the violence done in my name, including in the last few days, the disconnection of Gaza from electricity, the use of white phosphorus munitions on populations, and the active displacement of approximately 2 million Palestinians told to flee from their homes in a space of approximately 48 hours. Yeah, I just wanted to say that. And now we can talk about homos. So, to the homos. Planet Earth, land of homos and other humans, is burning. The fiery skies, which flare hotter each year, distort the face of the Earth and dissolve its wet particles into the atmosphere. The air is crowded with aquatic vapors rising from dark chasms and voids, from wells carved by the ancient disciples of the Earth, from the bottom of barren lakes and dry seas. Powered by the sun and propelled by the expansive qualities of vapor, homosexual spirits who had hitherto slumbered deep underground return to the world. They disperse into the atmosphere and poison the air with their curvatory logic, their tantalizing words, the graveyard stench of their breath. They laugh in our face, fill us with unease, occlude our thoughts. When walking down the street or lying down in bed, they appear before us, angels from below. They stare at us and call us names. Can we answer their call? Will we survive it? The vision of these spirits reveals how sweet, sacred, ancient homosexuality has been tainted by incalculable sacrilege. Now, homosexuality commingles with obedience, with flattery, with concession to convenience and compromise to reason, with acquiescence to laws and edicts dictated by heterosexuals, with mimicry, with smugness, with equanimity, with bland irony, with forgetting the inner essence of the gift of homosexuality entrusted to us. But this assimilation is not without residue. Its essence has not been fully digested just yet. We call to extricate the sanctity of homosexuality from the shell of impurity it has been imprisoned in, and to establish a new homosexuality. The true homo experiences in our era are those that occur early in life, in childhood and adolescence, abnormality, rejection, pain and suffering, and simultaneously, the individuation and chosenness of homosexuality. The recollection of these experiences in thought and in body are moments of communion with the essence of homosexuality. The power of objection as experienced in early life always rises above the power of consolation prizes gifted in return later down the road, establishment, respect, power, imagined harmony. The value of black coal mined from a homo's soul rises far above the value of diamonds produced by the gravity and pressure of the earth weighing upon him. We must not be deceived by the veneer of liberalism. Beneath the performance of social acceptance, revulsion, jealousy, and awe are rife. The state's love for homos is a lie, and so is any sweet talk about their rights and laws. The position of homos in political parties of any kind will always be dubious and unreliable. The position of homos in our culture will always be conditional. The free market constantly showers love on homos, but its unifying and simplifying motion will ultimately be the one to bury homosexuality. Homosexuality is an aberration. There is no homonormality. There is no homosexual social agenda to be poured into the straight one. There is no palatable, easy to digest homosexuality. Homosexuality renounces distinction, division, or any agreements between friend and lover, lover and foe, friend and hookup, teacher and lover, the combined and the unitary, the Lord and his followers. Homosexuality exists in intergenerational and interclass relationships, as well as kinship and affinity across genders. Homosexuality rebels against its own splits and bifurcations made in the last few decades between the holy and the profane, the worthy and the disdain. Homosexuality, despite all repression and denials, is inextricably bound with perversion and pederasty. Homosexuality is revolutionary. We live in an extreme time and place, in an everyday routine of raging murder and slow bloodshed. Israelis who carry weapons, soldiers appointed by the state or by their own accord, engage in wholesale slaughter in Gaza, the West Bank, and in the streets of Israeli cities. Military slaughter is a straight activity based upon the heterosexual fellowship of men, the brutal outpour of unknown desires, and education within the family, the community, and the nation. Homos have rebelled against the nation throughout generations, from Socrates to Pier Paolo Pasolini and Jean Genet in the last century. Straight people tell themselves that in times of crisis, every man can call upon his meager power to act within his limited human capacity and make a small change in the world. We homos do not believe in the power of limited actions, only in acts of greatness. The heroes of the future, like the heroes of the past, will be homos. We are not calling for a return to ancient homo modalities. We do not want to return to the closet or restore a homosexual world now lost to time. The new homo sanctity will be a product of the homo world in which we live today. But it is this new world we must recognize and explore. It is there we must now reinvent our existence as homos. We must teach ourselves to become homos, to decipher the ancient homosexual patterns imprinted within us and release them into the world, to identify what we already know. As a child learns to speak, as a young man learns to fuck, as an elder learns to recognize and love his ailments. We must practice homosexuality in order to once again reclaim it anew.
Please join me in another round of applause for all the readers tonight. And that's all. Thank you all so much for coming.